The Life and Acts of St. Patrick by Jocelin. Chapter 141. The Obedience of St. Volchanus. And a certain disciple of St. Patrick, named Volchanus, was eminent in faith and in religion, but especially surpassing in the virtue of obedience, and St. Patrick willing that this his piety, which was so well known unto him and unto God, should also be known unto his fellow disciples for an example unto them, commanded him that he should build a church wheresoever God should vouchsafe to direct. And hearing the word of the saint, he obeyed, and carrying a hatchet on his shoulder, went forth to seek a fitting place for the erection of a church. Then the spiritual father, observing him to go forth with the hatchet in his cowl, prophesied unto him with the words of consolation, Do not, well-beloved Volchanus, doubt of a fitting place, but wheresoever thine hatchet shall fall, there securely build and inhabit, and there shalt thou be among a great nation paying worship unto God. Thus having heard, he retired from the presence of his honored father, knowingly unknowing, and wisely untaught, yet persuaded in his mind to go whithersoever the most true teacher had directed him. Therefore the whole day did he go forward, nor did he aught, save to lift up his hands and his heart in prayer. And as the day declined eveward, the hatchet fell from his shoulder unexpectedly, yet moved of heaven, in a place neither intended nor foreseen. Then the man of God, understanding this to be the appointed place, with great labor builded there a monastery, and gathered together unto one holy society many sons of God, who were dispersed, and therein dwelling, holily and religiously finished he his life, and at length, renowned in his virtues and his miracles, he rested in the Lord. Chapter 142. Of Saint Rodanus, the herdsman of Patrick. And St. Patrick had a certain herdsman named Rodanus, and he was exceeding religious, and this man in his pastoral duty lived a hermit's life, and often being absorbed in prayer, he pastured the cows and the young calves together. And at the command of St. Patrick, the whole herd was wondrously retained under his control, nor was any disturbance or confusion there among, for never did the calves approach their mothers, nor depart from them, other than at the bidding of Rodanus, and this he did by the authority and the power of his father, St. Patrick. And he after a while learning letters, acquired sufficiently the knowledge thereof, and attaining the episcopal degree, he flourished during his life and after his death by manifold miracles. Chapter 143. Of St. Kertennus, the Bishop of Clochor. And Kertennus, a disciple of St. Patrick, bore the saint, now worn with age, on his shoulders, for so necessity required, and by his panting showed he his weakness or weariness. And the saint said unto him, Often hast thou carried me, yet never before have I perceived thee thus to pant. Then answered Kertennus, Wonder not, holy father, for now hath mine age come on me, and my companions whose years are as mine have from the forecast of thy bounty received the refreshment of a little rest, and mine head is covered with grey hairs, and I labour with daily toil, and earnestly do I long for quiet, which above all things else I need. Therefore St. Patrick, compassionating Kertennus, promised unto him a place fitted for contemplation, yet not unsuited to the exercise of pious duties. And as he much desired the presence of so worthy a disciple, he provided for him a church, yet not too remote from the archiepiscopal seat, which at the angel's command he had builded in Ardmatia, nor yet too near, lest by succeeding archbishops he should be oppressed. Thus was it done, that in his frequent visits to St. Patrick the man of God should not by the distance be wearied, nor his church appear contemptible by too close a neighborhood. And after some days he placed him over the church of Clochor, which the saint himself then ruled, and when he had thereto consecrated him, he gave unto him a chrismatory, which he had received from heaven. And St. Kertennus there dwelling, and exercising within doors the office of an abbot, and abroad the office of a bishop, cherished his grey hairs, and finished his life in holiness. Chapter 144. Of a boy who was blessed by St. Patrick. And a certain woman, who was strong in the faith, brought unto the saint her little son named Rodanus, to be instructed in letters, and for that she believed his blessing would render the child more docile and ready unto learning, humbly she besought on her son the benediction of his grace. Nor was she deceived in her faith, inasmuch as the saint covered him with the aspiration of his blessing, and assisted him with the divine favor, and he impressed on the boy the sign of the cross, and committed him unto St. Kertennus, that he might be instructed in virtue and in learning. And the boy thus blessed, in 15 days learned the whole psaltery, and afterwards he became a man of most holy life, and shining in miracles rested he at length in the Lord. Chapter 145. Of a woman who was raised from death. And Aethra, the wife of a nobleman named Eutychius, lay dead, and he, carrying her body placed on a bier, met St. Patrick near a certain ford in Clochor. And with many prayers he besought the saint that he would recall her to life, and promised that he and all his people would then believe in the Christ whom he preached. And the saint delayed not, but revived the dead woman, and baptized her husband, who at so wonderful a miracle thoroughly believed. And from the revived woman is it called unto this day the ford of Ethna, and the fluid element affording a passage unto all travellers, showeth the merit of her reviver. And often the saint visited Clochor and Momonia, working miracles in each, and in each he dwelled for the space of 7 years. Chapter 146. The testimony of one who was revived from death. And even unto the evening of his days did the saint continue his wonted labour and his accustomed work, sowing the field of the Lord with the seed of the divine word, from the fruit whereof he might gather eternal life. This the devoted ones of Satan perceiving and envying, they gnashed with their teeth, and one to the other they said in their malice, What shall we do? This man, the destroyer of our gods, the persecutor, nay the extirpator of our sect, worketh many miracles. If we let him go thus, all the people of Hibernia through him will believe in his God, and the Christians will come and they will remove our laws. Then took they counsel together, how they should destroy him with the snares, and under the pretence of justice bring him unto the death. And a certain woman was washing flax nigh unto the place where the saint was to pass, and her they directed to hide much of the flax in a hollow tree, and when the saint and his company passed by to accuse him as of the theft. And the woman did according as she was induced, nay rather as she was seduced, and loudly crying out, called these children of Belial, and with wicked tongue accused him thereof. And they, as before they had contrived, rushed forth from their hiding place, and seized the saint and his disciples as robbers, and exclaimed that they were guilty unto the death. And in the place where this accursed band were gathered together, was a tomb, and therein a man was buried. Him did St. Patrick, having first prayed, awaken from the sleep of death, and by the virtue of the truth, which is God, commanded that he should bear true witness of this their accusation. And the revived man, openly protesting the innocence of the saint and of his disciples, exposed the deceits of these wicked ones, and showed in the presence of all where they had concealed the flax. Thus was St. Patrick and his people marvellously freed from the hands of the destroyers, and his blood was in that day preserved, and brought salvation to many which were evil doers, for they who had contrived the death of the herald of life, were by this miracle converted unto God and obtained his mercy. Chapter 147. The cross that was not observed, and the voice which issued from the sepulchre. And St. Patrick was accustomed, wheresoever in his journeying he beheld the triumphal sign of the cross, to descend from his chariot, and to adore it with faithful heart and bended head, to touch it with his hands, and embrace it with his arms, and to imprint on it the repeated kiss of devout affection. And on a certain day sitting in his chariot, most unwontedly he passed by a cross which was erected near the wayside, unsaluted, for his eyes were held, that he saw it not. This the charioteer observing, marvelled, but he held his peace, until they arrived at the dwelling. But when they began to pray, as was the custom before dinner, then spake he of the cross which he had seen, and of the place where he beheld it. Then St. Patrick, the preacher of the cross, leaving his meal prepared, went forth of his dwelling, and returned unto the place on the road which he had passed along. And diligently he sought for the sign of life, and he found nigh unto it a certain sepulchre. And drawing near, he prayed in the sight of the Lord, and inquired who therein was sepultured. And a voice answered from within, that he had been a heathen, and that a Christian man was buried at his side, whose mother had been absent when her son died, and when he was returned into the bosom of the common mother, and that after some days she had come hither to wail, but knowing not the burial place of her son, had placed over him the Christian sign. Therefore the man of God averred that he could not behold the cross, because it was placed over a heathen who had been an enemy of the cross of Christ. And removing the cross, he placed it at the head of the baptized man, and commending his soul to God, he walked back unto his own dwelling. Chapter 148. A goat bleateth in the stomach of a thief. The blessed Patrick had a goat, which carried water for his service, and to this the animal was taught, not by any artifice but rather by a miracle. And a certain thief stole the goat, and eat, and swallowed it. and the author or instigator of the theft is inquired, and one who by evident tokens had incurred suspicion, is accused, but not only denieth he the fact, but adding perjury unto theft, endeavoureth he to acquit himself by an oath. Wondrous was the event to be told, yet more wonderful to come to pass. The goat which was swallowed in the stomach of the thief, bleated loudly forth, and proclaimed the merit of Saint Patrick. And to the increase of this miracle it happened, that at the command, nay rather at the sentence of the saint, all the posterity of this man were marked with the beard of a goat. Chapter 149. Of the cloaks which fell from heaven. And that he might the more entirely profit unto God by their conversation and their example, the saint was used to seek the society of holy men, and to join himself unto them in the most strict friendship. For, as Solomon witnesseth, as iron is sharpened by iron, so are the lives of holy men by conversation and by example inflamed into a firm faith, and more fervent love of God, the which how acceptable is it to the Lord, vouchsafed he to show by the token of an evident miracle. Therefore on a certain day, when Saint Patrick and a venerable man named Vinocus sate together, they conferred of God and of things pertaining unto God, and they spake of garments which by their works of mercy had been distributed among the poor, when behold, a cloak sent from heaven fell among them, even as the present eulogy of the divine gift and the promise of future reward. And the saint rejoiced in the Lord, and what had happened each ascribed to the merit of the other. And Patrick averred that it was sent unto Vinocus, who had for the Lord renounced all the things of this world, and Vinocus insisted it to have been sent unto Patrick, who though possessing all things retained nothing, but clothing many which were poor and naked, left himself naked for the sake of the Lord. Then from these holy men thus friendlily disputing, suddenly the cloak disappeared, and in the stead thereof the Lord sent down by an angel 2 cloaks, one truly unto each, that even in charity they might no longer contend. Chapter 150. A wicked tyrant is transformed into a fox. In that part of Britain which is now called Valia, lived a certain tyrant named Kertennus, and he was a deceiver, an oppressor, a blasphemer of the name of the Lord, a persecutor and a cruel destroyer of Christians. And Patrick hearing of his brutal tyranny, laboured to recall him into the path of salvation, writing unto him a monitory epistle, for his conversion from so great vices. But he, that more wicked he might become from day to day, laughed to scorn the monition of the saint, and waxed stronger in his sins, in his crimes, in his falsehoods and in his cruelties. The which when Patrick heard, taught by the divine Spirit, he knew that the vessel of evil was hardened in reprobation, prepared in no wise for correction, but rather for perdition, and thus he prayed unto the Lord, O Lord God, as thou knowest this vulpine man to be monstrous in vice, do thou in a monstrous mode cast him forth from the face of the earth, and appoint an end unto his offences. Then the Lord, inclining his ear unto the voice of his servant, while on a certain time the tyrant stood in the middle of his court surrounded by many of his people, suddenly transformed him into a fox, and he, flying from their sight, never more appeared on the earth. And this no one can reasonably disbelieve, who hath read of the wife of Lot who was changed into a pillar of salt, or the history of the king Nebuchadnezzar.